So the very last part of our unit on the human body, or the mammal body, I guess I should say, is about the nervous system. And this is a brief section of notes, also not something that we will really dissect in our mink. A lot like some of the blood vessels we will experience, the peripheral nerves, or the nerves out in the body, are really hard to find. And when you think about this, a lot of human nerves are as thick as a hair, so almost impossible to actually see in a body that you would dissect. So if that's true for a human, you can imagine how teensy tiny these nerves are going to be in a mink. Now these nerves also aren't tubes like the blood vessels, so we can't really stain them or inject them with latex like we saw the blue and the pink in the blood vessels. So these guys are basically just going to be lost within our dissection, and so we won't really see them. But we still want to know a little bit about this for our tests, so that's what these notes are for. Now, the nervous system, in a nutshell, is made up of two major pieces. The first piece is called the central nervous system, or CNS, and the second piece is called the peripheral nervous system, or PNS. And this is named after the locations. So the central nervous system is the central or axial part of the nervous system, and that's made up of your brain and your spinal cord, and that's it. And then your peripheral nervous system are all the nerves that enter or leave the brain and spinal cord to send information out to other parts of the body or bring back information from other parts of the body. And so this peripheral nervous system is a series of peripheral nerves, whereas the central nervous system is just two larger, really kind of organs, the brain and the spinal cord. So if we look at the brain first, the brain is covered in a three-layered membrane that is called the meninges. If you have heard of meningitis before, that is an inflammation, right, itis, of the meninges, usually caused by an infectious agent. But the meninges are a covering. So this brain, the meninges have been pulled off of this brain in the picture. But usually it would have sort of a sac around it that is these membranes. Like I said, these are three layers. The outermost layer is called the dura mater. Dura mater in Latin means tough mother, and so it's a thicker, tougher layer. The innermost layer is called the pia mater, which means gentle mother, so it's a very soft and thinner section. And then in between these two is what's called the arachnoid layer. And if that term sounds familiar, it's because arachnoid is spidery, right? What this is a tough outer layer, a thin inner layer, and sort of a cobwebby, spiderwebby layer in between. And so the names are appropriate. Now, what we're looking at in this picture here that I'll circle in blue is what we refer to as the cerebrum. So that's the main portion of the brain, basically covers the other parts of the brain, so this is what you see. The cerebrum is really two hemispheres, so you have a left and a right side, and each of those in the human are broken down into four lobes. So you have four lobes on your left and four lobes on your right. This cerebrum, as you can see in this picture, is highly folded. If we were to spread this cerebrum out, this covering out, it would like cover your lab table. But we fold it up real tight so that it actually fits in your skull and gives you more nerves and more surface area to use for thinking and processing and whatever. Now, this folding results in this kind of ridged look. All of the ridges or peaks are called gyri, or the singular would be gyrus. So like in red here, this would be a gyrus. This would be a gyrus. These peaks are called gyri. Then you've got what are called sulci, or a sulcus. These are the grooves or valleys. So here in blue, you would have these sulci, or a sulcus, that are these valleys, right? These darker areas where it folds under. Now, believe it or not, pretty much every sulcus, so every groove, every gyrus, so every ridge here, has a name. And so if you become a doctor, you'll learn all those. Otherwise, don't worry about them. So as a high school student, don't worry about them. Some of the major ones you see labeled here, this is called the lateral sulcus, right here in black. This right here in black is called the central sulcus. And then all of these different gyri have names too. So you see this one. This is called the post-central gyrus right here. Scary. And you don't have to know any of those. You just have to know that the valleys are called sulci and the grooves are called, or excuse me, the ridges are called gyri. Now those four lobes mentioned a moment ago, you see here in this picture, the frontal lobe is named because it's the front. This is where you have all the processing of your conscious thoughts, your higher learning, your higher cognition, and then the rear portion of it, circle here in black, is where you do all your motor processing, so your movement, your processing of movements. Now, this part here is basically, that I'm circling right now, is basically non-existent in most all other animals. And so this right here alone is what makes our brain and our cognition more impressive. Our abilities to reason, our abilities to have rational and logical thought processes are because we have such a large frontal lobe. Now the parietal lobe, moving backwards here in pink, is mainly for sensation. So this is the area that's going to process all of your senses. Things those might be special senses like seeing and hearing, or like your sense of touch, your sense of being able to tell the temperature of something, stuff like that. Third one, moving to the back here, is called the occipital lobe, right at the back of your head. This is mainly for processing your sense of sight. So although I did mention special senses up here, some of those are also going to be processed in these other lobes. And then the temporal lobe, which is right under your temple, basically on the side of your head, here in green, is going to be the area where we will further process smell and sound, but also where we process most of, or a lot of, your memories that you maintain. Now we also have what's called a cerebellum, which is sort of the lower back side of the brain. It says posterior and dorsal. This is made up of three lobes right next to each other, and it has very fine ridges. So whereas we got these big ridges on the upper part, the cerebrum, we've got little skinny ridges on the cerebellum. The cerebellum is there for fine-tuned motor control. It's basically your ability to pick up a pencil and then write something neatly. Also your balance and your equilibrium. So if you had a cerebellar issue, you'd be out of balance, you'd be falling over, and you would really struggle to, say, pick a pencil up off of a desk. So you couldn't do those fine-tuned movements of your hand and things too. Then you've got the brain stem, which is right kind of here, so circle it. It is what it sounds like. It's the stem or the base of the brain. It's made of three parts: the midbrain, pons, and medulla oblongata. In general, the brainstem is in charge of involuntary functions. So it keeps your heart beating, keeps you breathing, keeps all those things happening in your body that you don't have to think about. Keeps your blood pressure where it is, your temperature where it is, that sort of thing. Obviously then, if you have damage to your brainstem, it can be serious and deadly. Damage to the brainstem can stop your heart, stop you from breathing, all those kind of things. So that's definitely not a good situation. And then also, the brainstem gives rise to most of your cranial nerves, and we'll come back and mention a bit more about those in just a second. Now we also want to mention your spinal cord. Your spinal cord is the second part of your central nervous system. This is a posterior continuation of the brainstem. So this is going to run down your back, traveling the dorsal length of the animal within your vertebral column. So your vertebrae that we learned about a long time ago are there to help protect the spinal cord. Now this is the entry or exit point for your peripheral nerves. So nerves that go out to your body to send messages, such as to tell your hand to move, or nerves that are coming back from your body, such as to tell you that you just put your hand on a hot stove. Those are going to enter and leave through the spinal cord. Now, if we look at a cross section of the spinal cord, just like we cut it, and look at just kind of the blunt end of it, you're going to see an outer portion of what we call white matter. So that would be this stuff and all this stuff out here. And then a central kind of H, or sometimes called a butterfly, here in blue then, circled in blue, of what we call gray matter. So I realize it doesn't look gray, it doesn't look white really, but white matter and gray matter. There's a distinction here. The gray matter is the cell bodies of specific neurons at each level. So if we're looking at gray matter, we'll actually see things, if we look real close, that look kind of like cells, because those are the cell bodies of the nerves. But remember, nerve cells then have these long extensions, right? A nerve cell kind of looks something like this. So here's my cell body, and then it's got this axon thing that comes off. So those axons are going to travel up and down. That's what the white matter is. So the white matter are these long axons, these fibers, either running up or down, depending on the signal. So either running up toward your brain or down toward other areas of your spinal cord. The very last thing we want to mention or explain are what are called the cranial nerves. Now, there are 12 nerves that enter or leave your brainstem that give you special sensations or particular motor control in your kind of head and face. All the other sensory nerves and motor nerves enter and leave the spinal cord, but the cranial nerves, cranium, think head, come from and leave the brainstem. So this is a picture here on the left of basically the brainstem, if it was removed from the rest of the brain. And then you have different explanations here, names for things. But then you have on the left listed the 12 the 12 cranial nerves. You do not have to know all of these or recognize all of these. The only two I want you to know are cranial nerve 1 and cranial nerve 2, because they're kind of easy. These other ones you could probably kind of figure out by looking at their names, but let's talk about these two first. Cranial nerve 1 is the olfactory nerve, which at the end of it has little little bulby things, little balls called the olfactory bulbs. These protrude from the front of your brain and go to your nose. And so these will be special nerves that carry smells from your nasal region back to your brain to give you a sense of smell. Cranial nerve 2 extends from the base of your cerebrum, so kind of the base of your brain, and this is the optic nerve on either side. So this gives you the sense of sight. These nerves will extend all the way out to the back of the eye, which is right here called the retina. And visual information, as light enters your eyeball, is gathered at the neurons or the nerve cells of the retina. These are transferred then via the optic nerves back to your brain. And so this lens that you have in your eye will focus light and images on your retina, and the optic nerves will take those messages back to your brain. Now, what's kind of wild is that the optic nerves will also cross over each other, and they will flip the image over. So what your brain processes is actually a little bit different than what you really see. Now, again, the rest of these cranial nerves you do not have to really know, but the names kind of tell you what a lot of them do. Oculomotor, eye motor, helps control the muscles of your eye and how your eye moves. Don't worry about trigeminal or abducens. The facial nerve helps give you sensation and motor control of facial areas. The auditory nerves help you hear, right? Glossopharyngeal, go to your tongue. The vagus nerve, you've maybe heard of before, that goes down to your heart, actually. Helps control your heartbeat. The spinal accessory nerve, don't worry about it. And then hypoglossal, also will go help to control your tongue. So that's all you really have to know about the nervous system. That's more than enough for our purposes. Juniors, you'll learn a little bit more about some of the various functions of the nervous system after we say goodbye to our seniors. But this is all you need for now. So I know this is a lot of information in this whole unit, but remember you get to use your notes and your lab book for the test that's coming up. And I'm happy to answer any questions you have too. I'll see you in class.